Hello, வணக்கம் என் உயிரினும் மேலான இனிய தமிழ் மக்களே எப்படி இருக்கீங்க? This is your host Venki with another very interesting episode of Southern Spice, the only Tamil program on FM and AM radio in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut region, only on Radio Zindagi. We are streaming live on YouTube and Facebook in Southern Spice USA channels, and we are on air on radio at 1310 a.m. in Parsippany, New Jersey, 96.7 FM, Edison, New Jersey, and 5:40 a.m. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So you can listen to us or view this interview on any one of these platforms. And today on Southern Spice, what we have is another episode in the series of conversations I've been having with very talented and overachieving high schoolers from across the USA as part of the Gifted Gabber series. So today I have a voice for those with unseen neuro struggles. And who's the owner of this voice? It's a youngster called Rithika Sheelam. Okay, so Rithika Sheelam uh, is very passionate about this whole unseen neuro struggles space. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Rithika.
Hi,
Hey, Rithika,
everyone.
welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have someone like you who's working on something very different, and and that too, uh, it's a passion project. You are a high schooler, so yeah, go ahead. Tell us more about you, about your background, and about your what you're passionate about.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I am Rithika Shalom. I am a rising senior at Independence High School, so I'm located in Frisco, Texas, and the founder of Unseen Neuro Struggle, which is essentially a youth-led initiative that's dedicated to making invisible neurological conditions more widely accepted and understood. So, when I refer to invisible neurological conditions, I'm talking about things like ADHD, dyslexia, cerebral palsy, and even sensory processing disorder. So, I've hosted a variety of different awareness events, created different educational content, and worked alongside different nonprofits to kind of shift how we as a public talk about neurodiversity. And ultimately, the end goal of this entire program and this entire initiative is for those who feel different to not feel alone, and that there is a space and a platform for every voice to be heard.
Oh, that's brilliant. Why? What inspired you to start this?
Yeah, so I think it really started with the people around me. One
Mhm.
of my best friends actually has ADHD. And I remember when I was younger, we were working on this project that really should have taken us maybe 45 minutes, but we were there an hour and a half later, still working on this project. He got up and left the table nearly 15 times in that span of an hour and a half. And I was extremely frustrated and annoyed. I was like, you can just sit still for like a couple of minutes and we can get the project done. But no. And then eventually I came to terms and I realized that it wasn't a choice he was making intentionally. It was just something his brain truly struggled to control. And it was that realization, yeah, it was that realization that kind of opened my eyes to how invisible neurological conditions can impact each individual in their day to day tasks and in their everyday life. And unfortunately, that story wasn't really unique.
Mhm.
I was, yeah, so I was volunteering at this summer camp and we were doing something called reading circle time. So this is when all the elementary kids would gather around and read a chapter of this book. And keep in mind, this was something every student wanted to participate in, not because they like to read, but because of the little treat they get at the end. And every student rose their hand, even the guys, except for this one kid. And I was truly surprised. I just thought maybe he was shy or just didn't like reading. But then I later realized that he has dyslexia. And he had
Okay.
this fear that if he read out loud and accidentally stumbled over a couple letters or mispronounced a word, he would get laughed at. And so many people I knew with these conditions were just navigating a world where their needs aren't being recognized. And they're kind of living in this bubble that if they step out, they fear that they're going to get laughed at or even judged. And that's kind of what made me realize that there should be initiative to speak about these conditions. And then I think ultimately what pushed me to start was growing up, I became more passionate about neuroscience and mental health. I interned with the company that actually focuses on therapy and mental health services. And then I also conducted research on suicide prevention and kind of the stigma that surrounds mental health illnesses through UT Austin. And both of these experiences kind of helped me understand how oftentimes internal struggles are simply ignored because, well, they're invisible. And this was also during the rise of a lot of awareness platforms and nonprofits. And I noticed a very common trend that a lot of these platforms were advocating for causes that are more trauma related. So things like depression or anxiety. And yes, these are very, very important. And I'm truly glad that they have their own space to be talked about. But there was very little space for more everyday common neurodivergent conditions like ADHD or dyslexia. And yet they still leave a very deep and emotional impact. So I think that's ultimately what pushed me to kind of create Unseen Neuro Struggle.
Wow, that is very impressive, Rithika. Very impressive, and not a lot of teenagers, especially when they're going through high school, uh, apart from having to deal with their own coping stuff, right? Because there's a lot of changes that are happening to an individual in your early teens and mid teens, health wise, mentally, and even your curriculum becomes suddenly very, very serious
Yeah.
compared to what you were doing in middle school. So with all of that, coming to understand a condition like this and then taking that up as a cause and getting passionate about it, brilliant. It's unbelievable that someone would do something like this. So just to keep moving things on, so go ahead and share a moment, with us where you realize the importance of making these struggles more visible, more understood by people, because honestly, even today, there's very, very little understanding. I know that for a fact.
Yeah. So I think a very common interpretation of ADHD, and this was actually something my own best friend said, was they said, "Isn't ADHD just when you can't sit around and you can't stay still?" And as funny as that sounds, it's a very common interpretation of the condition. But it was that particular moment that really stuck with me. ADHD isn't just really about distraction or being distracted. It's kind of having a brain that processes everything around you all at once. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so even something as simple as like typing on your keyboard or like you have like a flickering light, all of these things can be incredibly triggering and even overwhelming for an individual with ADHD. And then on the other hand, with things like cerebral palsy, it's not just about physical movement. It can also affect your coordination, your communication, and even your energy levels and how active you are throughout the day. And yeah, oftentimes these challenges are overlooked because, well, and they're brushed off because, well, you look fine. There's nothing physically wrong with you.
Right.
And it was that moment that made me realize how much awareness and advocacy is still really missing. And these aren't just personality quirks or excuses that people are making, but real conditions that deserve their own unique understanding.
Yeah, so that's so true. So what are these challenges that these individuals face, people who are neurodivergent? What are the true challenges they face and they experience in real life?
Yeah, so I think there's multiple challenges, and I think that comes with having a medical condition. But
Right.
I think one of the biggest challenges that neurodivergent individuals face is kind of having to constantly prove that their struggle or their condition is real.
Hmm.
Um, because these conditions are oftentimes invisible, you kind of feel like you have to prove that it's true. And people think that everything must be fine on the surface. Well, because, obviously you look fine, there's nothing physically wrong with you. Yet no one really takes that extra step to ask how you're doing beneath the surface. And then there's kind of also the emotional weight. Since there's nothing physically wrong with you, you're oftentimes kind of called that you're lazy or you're being dramatic or you're just making things up or you're not even trying hard enough. When in reality, you're putting twice more the effort just to kind of do the bare minimum or just to catch up with one of your peers that isn't really doing anything at all. And
Correct.
this kind of creates a cycle of self doubt and even a lack of self confidence when the real issue comes from a lack of support from the people that are around you.
Well, so you obviously got into it and you launched certain initiatives, right? So, what have you launched? What are the events that you did, or what kind of goals did you set? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we've actually done like multiple events. I think we've done five so far. But I think two of my most meaningful and the most impactful events, in my opinion, were our Mismatch Sock Day and then our Color Outside the Lines event. So, our Mismatch Sock Day was kind of like an awareness campaign where we told a bunch of our friends and family to kind of, well, wear mismatched socks, kind of what the title is. Um, and this was to kind of symbolize how neurodivergent individuals oftentimes feel out of sync with their surroundings. It was a very simple campaign and didn't really ask a lot from our participants, just wear two different color socks or two different design socks. But it was a very powerful way to kind of spark that conversation about inclusivity and visibility.
Hmm.
And then our Color Outside the Lines event was a little different. It was a virtual creative challenge where we told our participants to break the rules on purpose. So we essentially encouraged them to create an artwork or an art piece that was abstract, totally unstructured, and well, they had all the creative freedom. And I remember one of our participants showed me they literally took a piece of paper and drew a bunch of like squiggles and a bunch of like random shapes. And I mean, it fit the criteria. We didn't want to give them a theme or any set of guidelines because we wanted to ultimately reflect the idea that there's no one right way to think. And I think this event kind of gave them that opportunity to embrace imperfection because I know our generation, everyone right now is so hardwired to, make everything perfect, even the small details. And I think this event kind of gave them to step out of their comfort zone and into that neurodivergent mindset, even if it was just for a moment. And I think for the future, I hope to expand the initiative and continue to make more events.
So this leads me to a very important question, Ritika. Again, for those of you who tuned in late, you're listening to Venki on Southern Spice on Radio Zindagi and Southern Spice USA on Facebook and YouTube. And I am in conversation currently with Rithika Shilam, a rising senior from high school in Texas. And her passion is to be the teen voice for those with unseen neurological struggles, right? So, Ritika, coming back to our conversation, you mentioned about mismatched socks, right? I've seen a lot of kids and youngsters wear mismatched socks, and I just kind of thought it's kind of cool, but it could be because they're not, they probably are in a kind of an ADHD spectrum, possibly, or no, they just want to follow patterns when everybody else is doing it. I want to do it too. Now, for parents or for anyone, even friends, um, who are unfamiliar with these concepts, right, how do you explain invisible neurological struggles to them?
Yeah, so I think the analogy that I personally like to use is imagine running a marathon with invisible weights tied to your ankles. So imagine you have like 10-pound weights on your left leg and 10-pound weights on your right leg, yet these are invisible so no one can see them.
Mhm.
And every step that you take looks normal to everyone around you, but internally it takes everything you have to even put one step in front of the other. And I think that's what it can feel like to have these neurodivergent conditions like ADHD or dyslexia. From the outside, you may look perfectly fine. So, you're participating in class well, you're texting your friends, you're hanging out with them, and you're even going to practice. But inside, your brain is essentially working overtime just to kind of keep up or do the bare minimum. And because it's something you can't physically see, people often dismiss it as laziness or being overly sensitive. But just because the struggle is invisible, it doesn't mean that it's imaginary. And kind of going back to that runner analogy, just because no one else can see the weights doesn't mean that they're not there. And they are very much there and it's very real. And that's exactly why awareness on these conditions matter. And it's really important to recognize the weight that someone carries. And ultimately, that's the first step to kind of understanding those conditions and understanding empathy and how neurodivergent conditions even work.
Perfect. Okay. And obviously, in going through this experience, you must have learned something itself, right? Yourself. and probably changed your perspective from before to now. So tell us about that as well.
Yeah, I think my perspective on this entire, platform kind of changed because I think the way I view leadership and communication has drastically differed. I used to think like creating change kind of meant being the loudest one in the room or like, talking the most or getting everyone's attention some way or somehow. But I later realized that proper attention can start in very quiet and meaningful ways. And I think I've also learned to listen more deeply and to notice when someone might be struggling, even if they're not saying that out loud or if they're masking their struggles. And I think it's also made me realize how much we take things for granted. Like, even just being able to sit through like a very loud classroom or a loud assembly, these are very normal things for us. But someone with those conditions, it can be, like I was saying, twice as hard for them. And small things like this that are ordinary for us are very, very daunting for individuals with neurological conditions. So I think those are some very important takeaways that completely changed my perspective.
Great. So if other kids, in high school or college, if they want to join you and support this cause, what would you tell them? How do they jump in?
Yeah, so I would say to start small and start genuine, I guess. You don't need a massive platform to create change. You just need to, have that willpower to start a conversation and speak up. And I think it's really important to kind of educate yourself on the conditions and make sure you're there for your friends and your peers that, once again, might be masking their struggles. I faced a lot of obstacles as I was trying to make my initiative something that people were really able to see and come through of it. So like a key moment or something my mentor said that really stuck with me was even one conversation can change a narrative. So you don't need a room full of people to understand what you're saying, even if it's just a couple people there. Because trust me, those couple people, it will create a lasting difference. And that's ultimately the end goal of this initiative. And then I think it's also important to not let other people downplay your cause, because if it's important to you, then it's definitely worth fighting for.
So, so is there a website or something that you can uh, get people to go and visit and even reach out to you?
Yeah, so our website is literally called unseenNeurostruggle.com, and all my contact information, everything's there. So if anyone wants to reach out, everything's there.
Perfect. UnseenNeurostruggle.com.
Yes.
Okay, it's not struggles, it's singular.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. UnseenNeurostruggle.com. Okay, so uh, I know we are running up against the clock, Rithika. So, what are your final takeaways from this whole entire experience? How long have you been doing this? And, where are you currently?
Yeah, so I think final takeaways, kind of tying back everything, is that you just really need persistence and willingness to speak up. I think I've realized how powerful it is to kind of create that space where people can feel understood and advocated for. And obviously, Unseen Neuro Struggle started as a passion project, and I've been doing this for like almost a year now. But
Mhm.
it's become a very constant reminder that visibility isn't about spotlight, and it's truly just about connection and building those connections with the people around you. And hopefully I can carry that mindset into everything I do, especially as I pursue a future in medicine.
Great. Yeah. Good luck to you, and please continue doing this. Don't stop it at all, and pass on the baton to the high schoolers once you go to college. But continue working on this because I think it's a very important uh, and useful thing that you're doing to society. So, good luck to you. Thank you so much for taking your time to come on Southern Spice and talk about this. Love to see and follow you and see your progress. And hope this spreads across the US and becomes a movement.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ritika. Have a good one. Bye. All right, Nergale, that brings us to the end of this episode of Southern Spice with the Gifted Gabber series. I will see you again with another episode very soon. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. Okay,